series we started just a few weeks ago, week 3 of a series called Imperfect Together, where here's the deal. This last week I was thinking about that title and I'm like, that sounds a little, oxymoronish. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it sounds like jumbo shrimp, right? Virtual reality, Microsoft works, 49ers and professional football. Like, it sounds like that type of thing, but here's the deal. Like, I started thinking, but this is not at all that type of thing. It definitely goes together. Imperfect together goes together. Where here's what I want to be talking about today. Last couple of weeks we talked about dating and we talked about marriage. Where today I really wanted to hone in on this whole concept of parenting. How many of y'all, like me, used to be an expert at parenting and then y'all had kids? How many people in here? Yes. It's a thing. I used to think I was, in fact, just this last week again, I found out that I know far less now that my kids are teenagers. I know far less about parenting than I thought I used to, It just has kind of been going downhill for me in my knowledge. But for those of you who have young kids, trust me, when your biggest concern is whether or not they're saying please and thank you, or your biggest concern is, oh my gosh, what are they watching on the Disney Channel? Like, it's not that big of a deal. You just need to praise Jesus for all of that. But when I started, when my wife and I were dating, actually, I remember I went up to her mama. I went up to her mom and I said, hey, I got a couple tips for you in parenting. Folks, I thought I was wise because I had taken like one class in Bible or something like that at that time. And so I said, no, I got a couple of tips for you. Here, let me give you a little bit of context. Her mom is the mother of 11 children, 7 of which are adopted, okay? This woman's a saint. She's an absolute saint. And I went up there because I thought, hey, I know what I'm talking about, not because I had kids, but because I was a kid. So, hey, let me teach you. So, you know what? Here's the thing. She was so gracious. She didn't say anything to me. Here's what she did. No joke. She started looking for other dudes that Brittany could date at that point in time, because I was an absolute idiot and I definitely deserved it. But somebody asked me once, he said, Rusty, is it ever okay for someone who's not a parent to actually give parenting advice? Parents in the room? No, that would be a no. That would be never. You are never, ever allowed to do that. And so I used to think that I could. And here's why, though. I thought because before I had kids, I thought that kids were like a blank slate. Anybody else? Like, I thought they were like a computer that I could just program and send them off. Like, if I just do this when they're young, then they're going to be good to go later on. Except that's not the case, right? Kids are far less but they're far more like a puzzle, where they have a temperament, they have a personality, they have all of these things where parents, we're trying to figure out how to fit that in and how to parent them and whatnot, which is why parenting so many times can just feel overwhelming. I mean, anybody in here a parent that has ever felt overwhelmed during parenting? Anybody in here at all? The rest of you are liars in the house of God. Like, it is a tough deal, which is why. Here's the thing, this entire series, regardless of whether it was talking about dating or marriage or parenting, whatever it is, I wanted this to be intensely practical and yet intensely biblical as well, because I just believe that God has so much that he wants to communicate to us in regarding all of our imperfect relationships. But just before we get started, I kind of like to know who my audience is. And so can I just ask, how many of you are parents in the room? Any parents in the room? Look at that. We are a fruitful bunch. Anyway, like, it's great. How many parents have one kid? Anybody just have one kid? Yeah. 2 kids? Yeah, that's the perfect amount, by the way. 3 kids in here? Look at this. 4? Anybody 4? Whoa. 5? Come on, y'all need a hobby. Anybody drive a 15-passenger van in the house? Anybody at all? Yeah, look at that. Yes. Anybody without kids right now in here? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is called wisdom. That's what that's called right there for sure. Where here's the thing, I am a parent, just to let you know. I have 5 kids in the house. In fact, we have a picture of it right here. This is the most recent picture. We did a hike, that's why I'm all sweaty and whatever. Anyway, when you look at this picture, here's the thing that you see. Only one of them actually looks like me, for sure, right? And it's definitely not like their Norwegian Swedish kid. Like, I don't know where he came from. And everywhere we go, we look like the UN. I'm for real. That's just how that works. we just look like the United Nations everywhere we go, but I love my family. But here's the thing, I have one quick nugget for you. When you came in, there was a program that you were handed. There's some notes if you want to take those. If you're online, just press the button if you want. But here's one quick nugget. It's this, is good parenting always starts with the end in mind. Folks, if we want to be good parents, it always starts with the end in mind. Like we have to ask the question, what do our kids, what do we want them to look like 20 years from now? What do we want them to look like 10 years from now, right? How do I want my kids' relationships to be? My oldest son, he's 15 years old. Like, what do I want his relationships to look like when he's 30? Or my other sons, they're 12 and 13. Like, what do I want their character to look like? My daughter, when she's 33, right? How do I want her relationships to look like when she's finally going on her first date? You know what I'm saying? Like what do I want for her in all of that? What do I want their character to look like? What do I want them to be like? What kind of relationship do I want to have, or do you want to have with your kids when they're out of your home? Folks, that's a big one. Andy Stanley actually says that's the one, like there's grace and there's mercy for everything else, but that's the one, the relationship with your kids when they're outside of your home. If you mess that up when they're younger, you will not have the opportunity to have that when they're older. That's a big deal in their life. But then what about their relationship with Jesus? Like what do you want that to look like as well? And see, how we answer those questions will absolutely affect the way that we parent them now. Where here's what I've learned, and this is just a side note on all of this stuff, is that in dealing with this, parenting isn't about having the ideal family, but it's about having high ideals. Right? That when we're looking at this stuff and we're trying to figure out, what is it I want for my kids 20 years from now, it's not about having the ideal family, but it's about having high ideals. And I know that there's some of you in here, and myself included, sometimes have gotten that backwards, where we need to release ourselves from that pressure. In fact, I got to tell you, I released myself from that pressure a long time ago of being the perfect parent. I don't know if there's some of you in here that feel like you have to be the perfect. I'm far from my kids know I'm far from the perfect parent. In fact, I do things that I wish I didn't. I have to admit, though, that's hard for me to admit. Like I have young kids, too, and when they fall off their bike, I'm always laughing before I'm asking how they're doing. Like anybody else? I'm bad like that, and it gets worse. I'm serious. Like at night, I got 2 little baby girls, and they're phenomenal. And when I go in to read a bedtime story to them, you know what I do? I skip. I do. I'll be like, hey, the gold bears, they were great, and all that, and then the end. That was it. Because why? Because they don't know the difference anyway. This feels like a mass confessional. You guys with me on this? It feels like this is cathartic, at least for me. But see, I say all these things because in all my years of ministry, you know what I've never seen? I've never seen the ideal parent. I've never seen the ideal family. In fact, when I look throughout Scripture, I very rarely even see the ideal family in Scripture. Really. Many of you may have known the guy named Laban, right? He was the father of Leah and Rachel, where he actually tricked his future son-in-law into marrying his oldest daughter because she was uglier than the younger daughter and thought maybe she would never get married in the first place. Really? I can't make this up. This is the Bible. Read it. Isaac and Rebekah. They were parents of Jacob and Esau. Here's the thing. Each parent actually had a favorite. By the way, so do you. You just don't voice it. Anyway, but they had a favorite, and they voiced it. In fact, the mother, who was so codependent and enabling, actually plotted with one of her sons to deceive her husband. It's weird. Why would you do that? And then Noah, y'all remember Noah? The great Noah built the ark. At the end of all of that, what happens? He drinks too much, passes out, drunk, naked in a tent. His boys find him. Folks, is that good parenting? That's not even good camping etiquette. That's, it's not okay, right? I don't even camp and I know that. Here's my point, is that it's impossible to find the perfect family. You won't be perfect, but there's a juxtaposition to all of that as well, where the truth is that at some level, your children are a reflection of your parenting. Your children will be a reflection of your parent, which is why it's so important. In fact, here's what God says about our kids in Psalm 127:3. Look what he says. It says, children are a gift. Underline that. Children are a gift from the Lord. They're a reward from him. You know what? Here's the deal. My kids are an absolute gift from God. They're an absolute gift from God for me. Now, are they perfect? No. Do I want to re-gift them sometimes? Yes. But they are a gift of God to me. And so here's what I want to tackle this morning, okay? Here's what I want to tackle. I want to tackle what decisions can we make to have a better chance at raising amazing kids? Like, what does that, parents, as grandparents, as uncles and aunties, like, what decisions can we make to have a better chance at raising amazing kids? Where again, the tension that every single one of us parents live in, and I think it's a fill-in I want you to write down. Here's a tension that we ultimately live in. We have no control, but we have tons of influence. Folks, if you don't know that yet, you will. We have no control, but we have tons of influence. Look what it says in Proverbs 21. It says, no human wisdom or understanding or plan can stand against the Lord. The horse are prepared for the day of battle, but the victory belongs to the Lord. Here's what that means, and I'm not calling your kid a horse, okay? But here's what that means. That verse means that we can prepare a horse for battle, we can feed it, we can train it, we can arm it, we can do all of these things. But ultimately, the victory is out of our hands. It's out of our hands. We have tons of influence and no control. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do to better our odds, where ultimately, whether you realize it or not, you are the greatest influence in your kid's life. That you are the greatest spiritual influence for sure in your kid's life, not the church, not your teachers, not their coaches, none of them. And yet there are things that we can help us raise amazing kids. And so there's 3 things that I listed for you down there. The first 2 we're going to go through pretty quickly, the last one being the most important. Here's the first one. Write this down. Create a sense of security by fighting for your marriage. You want to do the best thing you can for your kids, create a sense of security by fighting for your marriage. You know, last week we talked all about marriage, and in dealing with our kids, this is absolutely critical, and the reason why is because study after study has shown that a strong marriage is the key to secure feelings within our kids. It creates security inside of them. Now, if you're sitting in here and you are a single parent, or maybe you have a blended family or whatever, please do not hear what I'm saying as shaming or judgmental or anything like that, okay? You are where you are, and you know what? You did the best you can with your situation. I've told you many times that single parents or single mamas, you are my absolute hero, because I cannot fathom how in the world you do what you do. I mean, there's 2 of us in our household, and I guarantee you my kids are way more messed up than your kids, for real. So you keep working hard and doing the great work. But here's what I also can't do. I cannot gloss over the fact that every single study out there shows that children of a family that stays together have higher results in virtually every single category. We're men and women, husband and wife in here. Your marriage is the glue that keeps your family together, which means before you can take care of your family, you have to take care of your marriage. Here's how that kind of plays out in my household. My kids, you can ask them right now. They're all running around here. There's one of them, I think, in here right now. You can ask them, and they will tell you that they are absolutely second-class citizens in my house. Every one of them. And that's on purpose. That they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it will always, not sometimes, they will always take a backseat to their mama every single time, right? And that's on purpose. That's absolutely on purpose. Because here's the reality. If I'm investing in my marriage, I'm also investing in them. And so I take time to make sure I do that. And so how do we practically do that? Well, again, last week I spoke all about marriage. And if you were sinful and you chose the Hawks over coming to church, well, you know what? You might not go to heaven. But anyway, you can still look at it on lpchurch.com. The first one is create a sense of security by fighting for a strong marriage. The second one is we need to decide to prioritize character over performance. We need to prioritize character over performance, where I'm sure you've noticed that performance is a really big deal in our culture, isn't it? Like there's just this drive to say, hey, you need to get a 4.0, or hey, you know what? You need to be the starting point guard for the basketball team, or you need to be the lead singer for the band or the musical or whatever it is, and where we need to excel. And here's what I'm saying. None of that is wrong. Like excelling is not wrong. It's great, except when it's put above all else. Except when we do that. I mean, how many of you in your life have actually seen people who've excelled at performance but failed in their character? A lot of us have seen that for sure. I've seen it many times. And yet, you know what I've never had? I've never had someone come into my office and tell me, hey, Rusty, you know what? My life is falling apart. Man, I'm drowning in finances, my marriage, I'm jumping from marriage to marriage to marriage or whatever. And all of that is happening because I didn't make my 8th grade soccer team. No one's ever said that to me. You know, all this stuff is happening in my life, and it's because my dad didn't buy me a car when I was 16, you know? Or, hey, you know what? I keep screwing up my relationships in my life, and it's because I just did in kindergarten and first grade, I didn't have my sight words memorized. All you young mamas know, sight words. Right? None of this stuff has ever happened. No, we didn't go on family vacation. That's why all the things. No, none of that has ever happened. Where people, here's why I say that. Is because as parents, you know what we can do? Sometimes we can become so focused, so incredibly focused, regardless if our kids are preschool or in college, on things that actually don't really affect them in their adulthood. We can be so focused on some of that. Or again, we want them to perform, we want them to experience, we want them to have great experiences in their life, and yet sometimes that stuff doesn't matter, right? I mean, we want them to have good grades. We want them to have a great, all these different things. We want them to have great things, and yet, again, it doesn't always affect them later on here's the reality. No one's ever asked me, like, hey, Rusty, what'd you have here as a GPA when you were in 6th grade? Like, nobody's ever asked me that, right? And again, by the way, if you're a kid in here, I know we have some kids in here. If you're a kid, hey, be cool, stay in school, get good grades, okay? If you don't, you're going to end up like Pastor Doug or whatever, right? Like, just make sure. But again, sometimes we can be so focused on things that really don't have long-term lasting effects. Look at what it says in Scripture in Luke chapter 9. It says, and what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you yourself are lost or destroyed? And see, lost here is really referring to being spiritually lost, where it's asking, what does your kid gain if you profit by getting straight A's, but he loses his character? And so how do we do this practically? How do we help our kids through this? Well, if you noticed, and I've spoken on this before, but if you've noticed in our culture, our language typically falls in two categories. One is either shame-oriented or it's performance-oriented. Where some of you actually grew up in homes that are just like this, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like if you did something bad, you got the look. Anybody here ever got the look? Yeah. My mom is a 4-foot Asian woman. I'm terrified of that woman because she had that look down, right? But again, if you did something good, then you got the pat on the back. You got an approval. Here's what these quick fixes of praise or shame has produced in our kids. It makes them dependent upon others for how they feel about themselves. That when we do this in our households, it makes them dependent upon others, how they feel about themselves, which is why in this church right now, it is full of adults who are approval addicts. Because we lived in a household that was like, shame on you, proud of you, shame on you, proud of you, shame, right? All of these things where what we've done is we've tried to perform as best we can to have as many proud of yous as we could. And see, again, the truth is, though, is that your child, you know what? They're not necessarily seeking your approval. You know what they're seeking? They're seeking your interest. They want to know that you are interested in their world. And see, when we can encourage them in their character beyond what they've done, what they hear is, I love you, I believe in you, regardless of your performance. Look at what it says in Matthew chapter 12. It says, a good person produces good words from a good heart, and an evil person produces evil words from an evil heart. Folks, one of the greatest things that we can do for our children is to nurture their heart. Here's the problem with nurture, though, right? Here's what I know about every single person in this room and every single person watching online as well, that you care about your kids and you want the best for them. Absolutely. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't true. That you care about your kids and you want the best for them. And so you have done a great job of trying to nurture them. You have tried your hardest on trying to tell them how much you love them, trying to invest in them. You've done all of that. But here's the reality. Outside of nurture, there's also this thing called nature. Where it's not, if it was all about nurture, our kids would be just like a computer. Here we go. We're going to program them up. We're going to send them right out. No problem. Because we love them and we care about them. We're trying the best we can. But there's this other thing called nature. And in our nature, we're sinful. That there's this sinful stuff within our nature. And some of you, I know your parents are like young kids. You're like, no. They're amazing. They're adorable. They're so cute. No, they're little sinners. That's what they are. Right? Nobody has to teach little Johnny about selfishness and stealing lollipops and what. Nobody has to, none of that. Look at what James says in James 1. It says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Which is why the biggest thing that we can do for our children is to assess the spiritual path of our family. It's to assess the spiritual path of our family, which really means that we need to establish a spiritual rhythm in our family. I cannot stress that enough. In fact, here's a question. I'm just going to throw it out there. How normal is God in your home? How normal is God in our homes? I'm pretty sure many of you probably grew up in an environment like mine, where, how many of you grew up in a household that you had fine china, like special china that you had that was only taken out during Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving? Yes, we had fine china, which was displayed, by the way, in a hutch where we displayed our plates. Think about that. That's weird. But anyway, that's the way we did growing up, right? Like, there's my plate, isn't it? Whatever. Anyway, but we had these fine china. It was only brought out during special occasions, right? And see, here's what I'm getting at. These special place settings were far from necessarily normal use in our house. And see, sometimes for our kids, that's their experience with God. That it's not necessarily a normal, everyday occurrence where maybe it's this special occasion type of occurrence where we have to handle it well. We have to handle it carefully. Where it's almost like, hey, we're going to church today. You know what? Be on your best behavior and get dressed in your nicest clothes, right? It's a special thing. It's not normal. And see, some of you are raised in environments that were just like that, where maybe though God was important, but you weren't exactly sure why. Because he really didn't come out in the daily normal rhythms of your life. Maybe some of you are raised in a home where God wasn't normal at all. Maybe he wasn't there at all. Like that just wasn't a part of your rhythm at all, right? And maybe the only time God ever came out was when, your parents stubbed their toe or got cut off in traffic or whatever, and then they invoked the name of the Lord at that point, right? Or maybe even worse, God was a part of your home, but it was only in terms of punishment or in fear tactics, which it wasn't a healthy rhythm, which is definitely detrimental to our kids. In fact, look what the Apostle Paul says in Romans 12. He says, so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Where Paul is saying, he's saying, don't let God be like fine china that only gets brought out during special occasions. Which really means that in our rhythms, we need to be intentional. That we need to be intentional in our rhythms. And for some of you, let me just give you a sigh of relief, okay? Because for some, it's like, oh my gosh, right? Here's the deal. Spiritual leadership in your households has very little to do with how much knowledge you have. It really doesn't. It has a lot more to do with whether or not you're willing to step into your fears and insecurities, where we take this one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one rhythm at a time. So practically speaking, here's how we do this. Here's the first one of two. Number one is we let our kids see us deepening our faith. We have to let our kids see us deepening our faith. How many of you parents know that your kids are constantly watching? Anybody know that? Yeah, they're like Sting. I'll be watching you. They're watching everything, right? They're watching your actions, they're watching your beliefs, they're watching how you treat each other, they're watching how you deal with finances, they're watching how much alcohol you drink, like they're watching everything. And see, the reality is we can teach ideals all day long, but typically we reproduce who we are. Typically we reproduce who we are. Look at what it says in Deuteronomy 6. Again, somewhat similar to Romans chapter 12, but it says, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And see, let me be very clear here, because I don't want to create an atmosphere of guilt. I'm not asking you, and I'm not challenging you or encouraging you to be the perfect Christian parent. Matter of fact, if you're a perfect Christian parent, you're a fake and a phony, and the only thing that you're going to produce in your kids is intimidation. They don't need the perfect Christian parent. They don't need the perfect Christian dad. My kids don't need that. What they need to see is a father who loves God and loves them desperately, that I will submit to Jesus in every way that I possibly can. What my kids need is they need to see a mama who deals with life without compromise, where she's trying to represent an authentic faith. That's what my kids need. Yet I also know that for some of us in this room, this is difficult, because I've talked to you and you're just like, Rusty, but here's the deal, man. I wasn't raised in a Christian household. Like I wasn't raised in an environment like this that valued God. Here's the reality of that though. Your family tree does not have to be the only influence you have in raising your kids. That there's people around, there's growth groups, there's people that want to be able to help and invest in your children as well. It's why we exist as a church, because we want to be able to be there as a community of believers to say, I got you. And there's wisdom around you, mostly in the women that are around you, but there's wisdom out there. Folks, here's the thing. This part of it, deepening our faith, modeling it for our kids, doing it with our kids, is the most important thing that we can do for our children, full stop. It is absolute. I could teach you ideals. I've probably read 50 books on parenting. The number one thing we can do for our kids is to train them right in the Lord, period. Well, here's the reality though. And again, it was just in these last couple of weeks that I've kind of figured this out. My kids, I have modeled a Christian walk for my kids their entire life, from day one, period. Their mama has done it better than me, but I have done that their entire life. Here's the thing. Great. Yippee-ki-yay. Here's what I figured out, though. I was convicted of this earlier, that yes, it's important. Modeling is absolutely important. But you know what else I figured out? How many of y'all like sports? Anybody here like sports? Anybody? Yeah. Here's what I figured out. If I want my kid to get better at basketball, you know what? I got to put some shots up with them. If I want my kid to get better at baseball, I'm throwing the ball with them, right? Like we're playing catch outside. Where not only am I modeling faith with them, but I'm also working with them as well. Second thing you need to write down is you need to do faith with them. That not only do we model, not only do we show them a father or mother or uncle, auntie, grandparent, whatever, that we are trying to deepen our faith with God, but we do it with them. We help them along. And here's the thing. If that hasn't been something normal in your household, there's still time. That it's not over. That we can continue to help move the spiritual needle in our households, in our families. Parents, we can adjust the spiritual temperature in our homes where, again, we're not called to perfection, but we are called to invest in our kids and in their walk with God. It's the biggest thing that we can do. Where if we can put God first in our parenting, we will have a far greater chance at truly raising amazing kids. It is not easy, and you will not do it perfectly. But it is the most worthwhile thing that we can do. And I know that it's not even something that necessarily always comes naturally. Folks, I've been pastoring for years. It doesn't even come naturally for me. But I know that it's necessary. And so if we'll be intentional and create those rhythms, it will help raise amazing kids.